Hi, I wish I could be here today, but I'm actually home with the flu. Excuse me. I know that's annoying, but I'm probably going to do it a few more times. I don't have much of a voice. I came in last night and recorded this because I didn't feel like we could miss another day. So this is going to be, we want to get through chapter 2 for sure here. And I know we talked about the Articles of Confederation last week. The Articles was our first constitution, and remember, it didn't work. And it really didn't work because we made it weak. And we made it weak because we feared a powerful national government. So to protect ourselves from a powerful national government, we created the Articles that didn't have an executive branch or a court system, that had equal representation, so no one state had power over the others. But we didn't allow the federal government to really have any authority. They couldn't tax us. They couldn't borrow money. They couldn't have a military. They couldn't enforce laws that they passed. So they could pass a law, but they couldn't enforce it. Kind of like me saying, all right, nobody can chew gum in here. That's a new law. However, if you chew gum, I can't punish you for it, nor can I make you spit it out. Well, obviously, there's no meat behind it. Some people will follow it just because, others will not. So, you know, it was completely ineffectual. So we threw that out. And when we threw that out, after, you know, we started to have problems, again, we talked about all these last week. After we started to have problems, then we decided that we would start from scratch. Technically, when they held the Constitutional Convention, they were just supposed to revise the article. But what they did is they threw it out and started from scratch and wrote a new constitution that had to be ratified by the states. And the challenge, and I think we talked about this last week too, was how do you make a government strong enough to preserve order, to protect the people, but not so powerful, not so strong that it will deny freedom and liberty to the people. That's not an easy thing to do. So we created a form of democracy. Democracy is a government by the people. We took these notes last week too. But we didn't have a direct democracy. We don't have a direct democracy where everyone votes for particular policies or laws. What we have is a representative democracy. We choose people who then vote on legislation, policy, law. Okay, and we call that a republic. And you notice when you're reading some of the Federalist Papers, he talks about a republic. And that's all it is a representative form of democracy. All right, so what are the advantages? Well, you always worry about, if you have a democracy, will we have what is known as the tyranny of the majority, meaning that the majority of people, will they then vote away the rights of the minority? And people can be very passionate. Things can get them set off. We've all had times when we've got really upset about something that later on we look back at it and say, well, you know, I overreacted. If the people are really scared or angry about stuff, we may overreact and vote away the rights of the minority. I mean, we've seen that. We've seen that with the Japanese internment during World War II. And we certainly have seen that when people want to deny religious freedom to Islamic groups within the United States after 9/11. So a republic, you have some kind of go-between between the people and their passions and the actual laws that are made. They said that minority rights would be more secure. Now, there's no way to guarantee that rights are secure, but there's a lot of things in the Constitution that better ensure that individual freedom and liberty won't be taken away by the government. It's tyranny of the majority is a very major concept. I know we do a lot of things where it's majority vote. Majority votes on laws. House of Representatives and the Senate, whatever gets the most votes, you know, you need a majority of votes to pass a bill. Supreme Court, it takes 5 of the 9 members of the Supreme Court to make a ruling. I mean, we go with this concept of majority rule on lots of stuff, but we also have to have individual protection of rights. A majority cannot have the power to vote away the rights of the minority. And if they do, then we call that tyranny of the majority, tyranny if you prefer. There's a quote by Larry Flint. who said you can't have 5 wolves and a sheep voting for what's for supper. You know, if you do, if you have 5 wolves and a sheep voting for what's for supper, we're eating lamb tonight. But what protects the right of that lamb, of that sheep to live? Remember, Jefferson says that all men are created equal with certain rights, unalienable rights that can't be taken away, rights that were granted to us by our birth. And those rights being life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So how do we protect the individual right of that sheep, so to speak, or the minority thought from those who are in the majority? And the republic helps to protect them. So in our republic, we have a House of Representatives that is directly elected by the people. The House of Representatives, each state gets a certain amount, can't have less than one. It's based on population. But it's based on popular vote. Whoever gets the most vote in a House election wins that seat in the House. That's the only one of the House, Senate, and Presidency that was originally like that. The Senate was not. In the original Constitution, the senators were chosen by the state legislature. So we, as a people of a state, would choose members. In South Dakota, they'd go to Pierre to represent our state in state law. Going into that in the federalism. They are the ones who chose the Senate. Now that changed. We no longer do that. But that changed with the 17th Amendment to the Constitution. That was added in 1913. So now we have direct election of the president. But until that addition, and that's all an amendment is to the Constitution, is an addition that is added to it. And until that was added, we elected our senators. We didn't elect our senators. Now we do. The president, we still don't. Presidents are chosen by the Electoral College. If you don't understand this, you will before the end of this class, this year, before you take the test. But we don't choose the president. We vote for electors who then, in December, go cast their vote for the president of the United States. South Dakota has 3 electors. We get to pick those 3 electors. Those electors cast their vote for the president. A couple of major principles that we had, and probably one of the I don't know if one is bigger than the other, but federalism is a major concept. Federalism is chapter 3. If you haven't read chapter 3, obviously you need to, and we're going to spend time on federalism this week. But federalism is this concept that every state is given power, that we have divided power up. Some power is given to our national government, or our federal government in Washington, D.C. But most powers are then, we say, reserved for the states, which means that the states have their own state legislatures and their government. They have their own Supreme Court. They have their own constitutions. They write the criminal law code for the state. And criminal law is, what can't you do? I mean, you can't kill people. You can't rob people. You can't those things. What are the punishments if you do those things? Well, that's our criminal law code. That's written at the state level. So there's 50 different criminal law codes, one for each state. They can tax. So can the federal government, but the states can tax us. States have their own constitution that establishes how the state government works, and also what rights that individuals have within the state. And then at least some voting regulation. Now, the states used to have the authority to make a lot, but they were abusing that. They were denying people the right to vote because of, race or gender or so on. And over the years, we've added things to the Constitution that have limited the state's ability to regulate voting stuff. Federalism is a concept that the states make most of the rules for the state. And if I used this example before, bear with it again. But think of each teacher and each classroom in our school as a state. And think of our school board and superintendent as the federal government. They make some rules that I have to follow. Okay, we can't eat in class. That's made by the superintendent and the school board. So I can't say to you, go ahead, bring a sandwich and eat in class. But for the most part, they don't tell me what I have to do. They don't tell me, what kind of assignments I need to give, what kind of tests or activities, or, if I allow you to speak out of turn, or if I make you raise your hand. Most of the rules in the classroom are made by the teacher of the classroom. Okay, and think of that as them being a state. Most of the rules that regulate the conduct of people within the state are made by the states themselves, not the federal government. That's federal. Education is a great example. How old do you have to be to drop out of school? In South Dakota, it's 18. There's no uniform age across the nation. Most of the funding comes from our school, comes from the state legislature. So there are some federal laws the states have to follow, but for the most part, the states make most of the rules. Enumerated powers are powers that are given exclusively to the national government. They are written into the Constitution, so we know they can do this. Like Congress has the power to tax. Congress, let's not use tax because that's a concurrent power. Let's use declare war. Congress has the power to declare war. Congress has the power to claim money. Congress has the power to make trade agreements with foreign nations. States don't have the power to do those things. We know that Congress can do it because the Constitution specifically gives them those powers, and we call those powers enumerated powers. The president can make treaties. The president can issue pardons. There's some other things presidents can do. We'll study them this year, but those are enumerated powers. Those are given exclusively to the president. So these are examples of enumerated powers specifically given to the federal government. Reserve powers, excuse me, again, are powers that are then what we say reserved for the states. What the Constitution says, what the 10th Amendment says, is any power not specifically given to the federal government are then reserved for the state government. So it doesn't say anything about issuing marriage license or driver's license, or it doesn't say anything in the Constitution about gambling, anything like that. So then that's up to the states to make those decisions. So can same-sex couples get married in a state? That's a state issue. The federal government doesn't have the enumerated power to make it. Now we'll get into federalism a little bit more because it gets kind of complicated. But for today, understand what reserve powers are. There's regulating interstate commerce and intrastate commerce. Intrastate commerce is within the states itself. There's not much intrastate commerce anymore. Concurrent powers are powers that are shared by both the national and the state government. So remember I said the states can make criminal laws? Well, there are also federal criminal laws too. There's not nearly as many, but if you're a terrorist, you're going to be violating a federal law. If you are making illegal money, counterfeit money, that's a violation of federal law. So there are some laws that the federal government makes on criminal conduct in some states. But there's also things like taxing, building roads. You know, both the state can borrow money, so can the federal government. Those we call concurrent powers. Separation of powers is the second major concept here. And that's really what we were getting into in Federalist number 51. Separation of powers is really dividing power up among the different branches. Is what we're looking at. Now we have three different branches of government. I'll come back to that. So we have the legislative branch, which is made up of the House of Representatives and the Senate. That's the lawmaking. We have the executive branch, which is the President of the United States and the executive officers. And we have the judicial branch, which is the court system, especially the Supreme Court. We don't say government has the power to tax. We divide power up. So the Constitution says that Congress has the power to tax. The president cannot raise your taxes nor lower your taxes. The Supreme Court can't either. We've separated power. We've separated these three branches. And then we've assigned different powers to each branch. And there's something known as checks and balances, which again we'll get into much more in depth later. But power given to one branch can be limited by a power given to another. An example of that would be, let's use the power to tax. Congress has the power to tax. But if before a bill becomes a law, the president has the authority to veto that particular bill. So even though the president can't tax us, the president can decline or veto a tax bill that Congress makes. And there's a number of things there. Like the president has the power to make treaties. However, those treaties have to be ratified by a two-thirds vote of the Senate. So the president's power to make treaties is limited. It's not an unlimited power. By dividing that power up among the three branches and the concept of federalism, so some power is also divided and given to the states, that power is not concentrated in the hands of one individual or one small group. That some powers are given to them, but other powers are given to other branches of government. And again, that doesn't guarantee that powers won't be abused, but it makes it a lot harder to do so. If I have the power to do whatever I want within the school, I can make some horrible, horrible, horrible decisions. I can say that we're only going to school for 1 hour a day. I'm a dictator. I can make those rules. And we were afraid of one person having too much power. But we realized we have to give power to government. So how do we ensure that some terrible decisions won't be made? Well, let's give each, the powers that we decide that we need to give to government, let's divide those out. And then let's have other checks on those powers themselves. And that's a major concept, both the checks and balances and federalism. To understand the American government system, you have to understand those two things. And I think you will. When you look at checks and balances, war powers. Congress has the power to declare war. They can declare war. The president is commander-in-chief of the armed forces. The president is the one who actually carries out a war if it's been declared. You can check out a chart, I think it's on page 31. Write that down, and you should look through those so you understand that. We'll study it again later in the year in more in depth, but we should understand that. Okay, so this new Constitution was written, but it had to be ratified by the states. And without it being ratified, it can't go into place. And there was a group of people that were in favor of it. Those were Federalists. And they supported a stronger national government. The anti-Federalists were those who opposed this because they felt that it was making the government too powerful. And remember, we fear powerful governments. So the Federalists supported a stronger national government. Hamilton and Madison were Federalists. And they wrote what are known as a Federalist paper, a series of letters that were published in newspapers explaining different aspects of this new Constitution. The anti-Federalists supported states' rights. We call these states' writers. They didn't trust this new government. Now remember, Jefferson was not present when the Constitution was written. He was an ambassador in France. So he didn't write, he had no say in this new Constitution, and he didn't trust it. And the other thing the anti-Federalists wanted was they wanted a Bill of Rights. They wanted some protection of individual rights, and the Constitution didn't have those. I think Jefferson was afraid that without those protections, then the majority could vote away the rights of the individual. Madison, who basically was a writer of the Constitution, I think he felt that there was with checks and balances and other things involved there, that a Bill of Rights was not needed, that each state had their own Bill of Rights that would protect. However, that was a major sticking point. So what happened was Madison promised, hey, if you guys ratify this Constitution, you got to have it. I promise you it will add a Bill of Rights. And we did. In 1787, the Constitution was ratified and went into effect. And in 1791, the first 10 amendments were added to the Constitution. And those 10 amendments are what we refer to as the rest of the changes in the Constitution. There's been 27. The first 10 came all at one chunk. And then numbers 11 through 27 have come one at a time throughout our history based on different things. So again, look on page 36 with this. Slavery, well, the word slave or slavery was never actually used in the Constitution. However, it was certainly referred to. There was a 3/5 compromise when it came to how do we determine the number of people that each state has. Well, the slave states wanted, hey, let's count slaves as people here, so we would have more say in the House of Representatives. Well, the non-slave states said, that's not fair. We're not really classifying individuals. We're not giving them any freedoms. Why should they be part of the, the number of a state? And they made a 3/5 compromise. Each slave, again, they didn't use the word slave, it was counted as 3/5 of an individual. There was a fugitive worker, which if a slave escaped, that he had to be sent back. He went to a free state, that he had to be sent back. And they said can prohibit the importations of persons, those persons were slaves. Can't prohibit before 1808. After that, they can. And some people say, well, why? You know, if we're talking so much about freedom and liberty, why would we have this? Well, the truth of the matter is that at this point in time, slavery was so entrenched within, and it was such an economic factor that if slavery would have been banned by the Constitution and passed. That's pretty much it for notes on chapter 2. I'm going to stop there right now and see